The dog wouldn't stop staring at the air vent, and that was how I knew something had already gotten inside the walls. I had 9 children in that old school. I'd taught every one of them to walk heel to toe on the hard floors, to whisper their arithmetic, to treat any sound at all like a loaded gun. For 6 days it worked. For 6 days the building held. And for 6 days I stood at the high window and counted the dead pressing up out of the marsh, because counting was the only thing my hands knew how to do that didn't make noise. My sister was 2 miles away, trapped in a stairwell, a bad ankle, 1 pistol, and a radio I could hear but couldn't answer. Every single morning, just after first light, her voice came through the static, steady as a nurse at shift change, telling me how to keep those children alive, telling me not to come for her, telling me she'd already done the math. I made a choice out there in that marsh. It's the heaviest thing I carry. And 14 months later, safe, on an island with walls of water on every side, I still walk down to the rocks every single morning, turn on a radio that can't reach anyone, and say 2 words into the static, because 3 weeks ago, under the hiss, I think I heard her laugh. So let me take you back to where it started. The dog wouldn't stop staring at the vent, and that was the first thing that told me we were already too late. We'd been in that school for 6 days. I knew every sound the building made by then. The way the heating pipes ticked when the sun hit the east wall, the soft groan of the gymnasium doors when the wind pushed against them. I'd learned all of it because learning the building was the only way to keep the children from hearing the other sounds. The ones outside, the ones that came at night and pressed their faces to the glass on the ground floor and breathed against it until the glass fogged. But that morning, the dog, a stiff old shepherd named Biscuit that belonged to none of us, sat in the middle of the hallway and stared at the return air grill near the ceiling. And his lip pulled back without a single sound coming out. I put my hand up so the kids behind me would stop. There were 9 of them. There had been 10. And behind me, 3 rooms back, behind a door I had bolted shut with my own hands, was the reason my hands had not stopped shaking in 4 days. That was my sister. That was Delia. And she was still talking to me through the wall. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning is the only part of this I still understand. My name is Roan Vesper. I'm 46. Before all of this, I drove a school bus for the Kittery district in southern Maine, Route 14, the long one that looped out past the salt marshes and came back along the water. 22 years on that route. I could tell you the name of every child who ever fell asleep against the window. And I could tell you which stops flooded in the spring and which ones iced over first in December. My wife used to say, I loved that bus more than I loved being home. And she wasn't entirely wrong. And she's been gone 3 years now from something ordinary, something with a name and a treatment and a funeral. Back when death still came with paperwork. I mentioned the bus because of a habit I had. Every morning, before I turned the key, I counted the seats. Empty or full, I counted them, front to back, and I touched the metal rail on the last seat with 2 fingers. Delia used to make fun of me for it. She rode with me one summer when her car died, sat in the very back, and every morning she'd slap that rail before I could touch it and say, "Counted for you, Captain. Remember that. The counting. It comes back." When it started, I wasn't on the bus. It was a Saturday. The news called it a respiratory event first, then a neurological one. Then it stopped calling it anything because the people who wrote the news stopped coming to work. By the 3rd day, the roads were the kind of quiet that has weight to it. By the 5th day, I understood that the quiet was the safest thing left, and that any sound a person made was a kind of announcement. Delia found me on day 8. She'd driven from Portland with her car packed full of the wrong things, canned pumpkin and a case of seltzer and a photo album, because that's who she was, 41 years old, and still guided by her heart faster than her head. She was a pediatric nurse. She was good at it, better than good, the kind who remembered which kid was scared of the stethoscope. She showed up at my door with a split lip and a story about a man on the turnpike. I never made her finish telling. "We can't stay here," she said, standing in my kitchen, not sitting, never sitting when she was scared. "Roan, there are children at the district office, a whole group of them. The buses went out that first morning, and then it hit, and the drivers they left them. Some of them. There are kids in that building right now with no adults, and I cannot, do you understand me? I cannot leave them there." I understood. That was the trouble. I always understood her. We took my truck. We found 7 of them in the district transportation office that first night, huddled in the dispatch room where I'd clocked in for 22 years. And over the next 2 days, we found 3 more scattered around the neighborhoods where the buses had stopped. The oldest was a boy named Tobias, 13, who'd kept the little ones alive by making them play a game where the loser had to be completely silent for an hour. Smart kid. Too smart to still believe an adult could fix this, which made him hard to reassure, because he watched everything I did and checked it against what he already knew. The youngest was a girl of 5 named Wren, who did not speak at all, not for the first 3 days, and who held onto the strap of Delia's bag with a grip that left marks. We needed a real building. My house had too many windows and only one door, and one door is a trap, not a defense. So I thought about the route. 22 years of that route. And I knew the one building out there that was built like a fist. Marsh Point Elementary, the old consolidated school out past the marshes, decommissioned 2 years back when they built the new one closer to town. Brick. Small windows set high. 2 stairwells. A boiler room in the basement with a steel door. And, most importantly, one main entrance with a security vestibule they'd installed after some scare years ago. A double-door airlock of a thing with a buzzer and reinforced glass. I'd driven past it 1,000 times. I had a key to the bus bay in the back from the days when we stored overflow vehicles there. That key was still on my ring. Small things. They matter more than you'd think when everything large has failed. We moved the children out there on the 9th day at dawn, in 2 trips, and Delia sat in the very back of the truck on the 2nd trip with the little ones. And when I looked in the mirror, she slapped the tailgate rail twice with her palm and mouthed, "Counted for you, Captain." I almost drove off the road. The school held. For a while, the school held. The infected, and I'll call them that, though I never liked the word, they weren't fast, not the way people imagine. They were patient in a way that was worse than fast. They didn't hunt so much as accumulate. Sound drew them. Light drew them at night. A single one might stand at the base of a building for an entire day, swaying. And then a second would arrive, and a third. And by the 4th day, there'd be a loose crowd of them pressed to the walls. And you learned that the danger wasn't any one of them. It was the arithmetic. They added up. So we ran the school like a submarine. Lights out after dusk. No running in the halls. We hung blankets over the high windows. We cooked once a day on a camp stove in the boiler room where the smell and the hiss wouldn't carry. I taught the kids to walk heel to toe on the hard floors. Delia ran what she called quiet school in the mornings, math and stories, all of it whispered. And the strange thing was, the children got calmer. Not because the world got safer, but because someone was acting like tomorrow would need arithmetic. The one small mercy was the vestibule. That double-door airlock meant a body could get through the outer door and still be trapped by the inner one, and the inner one we'd chained. It bought us margin. Margin was everything. I want to be honest about how it went wrong, because I've turned it over enough nights now to have stopped protecting myself in the telling. On the 11th day, a boy named Emmett, 9 years old, spiked a fever. Just a normal fever, the ordinary kind, from a scrape on his shin that had gone red and hot. Delia looked at it, and her face did the thing a nurse's face does when the problem is real but not yet a catastrophe. And she said we needed antibiotics or the leg would go septic, and there was a pharmacy 2 miles back toward town. I said I'd go alone. She said the doses and the drug names and the risks of the wrong choice were in her head, not mine, and she was right. And I hated that she was right. We went together. We left Tobias in charge with the rules written on the whiteboard and a whistle he was to blow only if the inner chain failed. We took the truck to within half a mile and walked the rest, because engines carry. The pharmacy was a mistake from the moment we saw the door standing open, not forced, open. Someone had propped it with a shopping cart, and a propped door in that world meant one of two things, both bad. Either someone wanted people to come in, or someone had left in a hurry and not looked back. We should have turned around. I've said that to myself so many times the words have worn smooth. Inside, it was dim and close and smelled of spoiled things. Delia went straight for the pharmacy counter and vaulted it like she was 20. And I stood guard at the end of an aisle where I could see the door. She found the amoxicillin. She found a second thing, an EpiPen. For later, you never know. And she was zipping the bag when the shopping cart at the front door moved. Not fell, moved, rolled inward, slow, the way a cart rolls when something leans on it. 3 of them came through, then a 4th. The prop door had been a collection point, and we'd walked into the middle of the arithmetic. We went out the back. I knew there'd be a back because every pharmacy has a loading area. And we hit the fire door running and came out in an alley. And that should have been the end of it. We should have been clear. But Delia's foot caught the lip of a loading dock in the dark, and she went down hard on the concrete. And her ankle turned all the way over, and I heard the sound it made. She couldn't run. I got her up. I got her arm over my shoulder. We moved, but a person carrying a person moves at 1/3 the speed. And they came around both ends of the alley because sound had done its work. And there were more of them than there had been at the front, far more. And I understood in one cold second that the pharmacy hadn't been a random gathering. It had been a nest, a dense one, dozens. We made it to a stairwell of a parking structure across the street and up 2 flights and through a door that latched. And we sat on the cold landing with our backs against the door while they filled the level below us. And Delia held her ankle. And she looked at me and did the math faster than I could, the way she always did. "You have to go back to them," she said. Not a question. Her voice was very level, and that levelness was the most frightening thing I'd heard in 11 days. Tobias can't hold 9 kids alone if that inner chain goes. You know he can't. I'm not leaving you in a stairwell with a broken ankle. It's not broken, it's sprained. Don't be dramatic, she said. And she almost smiled. And that almost smile is a thing I'd give a great deal to unsee, because it was so much her. Listen, you go back tonight, over the roofs if you have to. You know this town better than anyone alive. You get to the truck. You take Emmett his medicine. And you come back for me when the crowd downstairs thins. They always thin. You taught me that. That was the plan. I want that understood. I did not decide to leave my sister. We made a plan, together, the way we'd done everything. And the plan was that I would come back. I gave her the pistol and both spare magazines. I gave her half the water. I gave her the whistle off my own neck. And I went out a maintenance window and across a low roof and down a drain pipe I wasn't sure would hold my weight. And it held. And I got to the truck as the light was going, and I drove back to Marsh Point with the medicine and my hands so tight on the wheel that they ached for an hour after. Emmett got his first dose that night. The fever broke by morning. Delia had been right about the drug and the dose, right the way she was always right. And I remember standing over that sleeping boy at 3 a.m. thinking, I'll go back at dawn. The crowd will have thinned by dawn. At dawn, the marsh was full of them. Not a few, not a loose gathering. A tide of them had come up the road overnight, hundreds, drawn by God knows what. Maybe the truck's engine, maybe some sound from town, maybe nothing at all, maybe just the slow accumulation the world had become. And they were between me and everything. Between me and the truck. Between me and the road. Between me and Delia. 2 miles back, in a stairwell. With a sprained ankle and one pistol and a whistle. I could not get out. For 4 days I could not get out. And I stood at the high window of Marsh Point Elementary and I counted them, front to back, the way I count seats. Because counting was the only thing my hands knew how to do that didn't make noise. If stories like this are the kind that keep you up, stay with me, because this is where it stops being a story about the outside. On the second morning of being trapped, the radio picked her up. We had a hand-crank emergency radio, the kind with the little dynamo, and I'd left it with Tobias to scan the bands for any broadcast, any voice, any word that somewhere someone was organizing. Mostly it gave us static. Once it gave us a looped government message that told us to shelter in place, which was almost funny. But on that second morning, Tobias came and found me at the window, and his face was wrong. And he handed me the radio without a word. It was tuned to a low channel, one of the little handheld frequencies, the kind kids' walkie-talkies use. And through the static, thin and cracked, but unmistakable, was Delia's voice. She'd found a radio in the parking structure. A security desk, maybe, or a maintenance kit. She was on a channel our hand crank could just barely catch. And she was talking, low and steady, giving her situation like a nurse giving a report at shift change. North stairwell, level 3. The door still holds. Ankles swollen, but I can bear weight on the toe now. 2 magazines, 31 rounds, I counted. Water's low. Roan, if you're getting this, I know why you didn't come. I can see the road. Don't you dare feel bad about the road. You did the math. Now do it again, and don't come until it's clear. I tried to answer. Our unit could receive on that band, but it couldn't transmit. It was a receive-only crank set. And I stood there, holding a machine that let me hear my sister, and not one word back to her. And I pressed the button anyway, over and over, like a man knocking on a door he knows is locked. She talked to us every morning after that. Same time, just after first light, as if she'd decided that a schedule was a form of hope. She rationed her words the way she rationed her water. She told us about the crowd below her, whether it had thinned. She told me twice exactly how to reach her if the road cleared. Which roofs, which drain pipe. She told the children a story once, a whole story about a fox who lived under a school and only came out at night. And the little ones sat around the radio with their faces open the way faces used to be before. And Wren, who still didn't speak, put her hand flat on the speaker as if she could feel Delia through it. And every morning she ended the same way. "Counted for you, Captain." I need you to understand what that did to me. Because on the 4th day of the tide, the arithmetic changed again. And it changed against her. Emmett's fever came back. Not the leg this time. Something in his chest. He'd been on the amoxicillin and it should have held, but the second fever climbed faster and meaner, and by afternoon he was breathing in a way that scared even the older kids, a wet, hauling sound. And I had no nurse. I had a whiteboard with Delia's drug notes and a radio that let me hear her and not ask her anything. I got her on the morning band, and I begged the dead air. I described his breathing into a microphone that broadcast nothing. And that afternoon, as if she'd heard, as if some thread still ran between us, she said the thing that broke the plan in half. "If any of them get sick in the chest," she said, in her steady report voice, not knowing, not able to know, "you'll want the amoxicillin plus something for the airway. There should be a nebulizer at the school. In the nurse's office, decommissioned or not. They don't take those with them. And albuterol. Check the office. Check the locked cabinet. The code at every district school is the building number. They never change it. The building number of Marsh Point Elementary was on the sign out front, 0411. I went to the old nurse's office and the cabinet was there and the code worked, and inside was a nebulizer, dusty but intact, and 2 sealed albuterol vials, expired by a year but sealed. I set it up. I ran it off the boiler room's little inverter. And I sat with Emmett through the night and watched the wet sound in his chest loosen. Watched a 9-year-old boy pull back from a doorway I'd seen my wife walk through. And it worked. It worked. My sister, 2 miles away in a stairwell, had reached through a one-way radio and saved a child she couldn't see. That was the night I stopped being able to lie to myself about what I was going to have to choose. Because here was the shape of it, laid out cold. The tide in the marsh was not thinning. If anything, it was thickening, more of them arriving each day than leaving. And I came to understand why, on the 5th day, when I finally saw the pattern from the high east window, they were following the water. The marsh channels at high tide carried sound and scent inland. And something upriver, some larger source, some town or highway, was feeding them down the waterway toward us in a slow, tidal rhythm. Twice a day, with the tide, the crowd around the school swelled. Twice a day it ebbed. But never all the way, never enough to walk 2 miles through. And Delia's water was almost gone. She told us so herself that morning in the same level voice. "Down to a swallow or 2, so I'll go quiet in a day or so to save my throat. Don't worry when I do." Don't worry when I do. As if that were possible. So the choice was this. To reach Delia, I would have to go out into the tide at its lowest ebb, cross 2 miles of open marsh road, get her, and bring her back. A woman who could bear weight on her toe but could not run. That was hours. That was hours of noise and movement through the thing I'd spent 11 days teaching children to avoid. And to do it, I would have to leave 9 children in a building with a 13-year-old and a sick boy and a chain on a door that had already, twice, begun to strain. Or I could stay. I could keep the arithmetic in my favor. I could keep 9 children alive. And I could listen to my sister go quiet on the radio to save her throat, and then keep being quiet day after day, until the quiet meant the only thing quiet ever meant out there. I did not sleep. I stood at the window, and I counted the tide. Here is the part I've never told anyone all the way through. On the 6th morning, the day the dog stared at the vent, Delia did not come on at first light. I sat with the radio and turned the crank until my arm burned, and then there was nothing, just the hiss. And I told myself she'd meant it about going quiet to save her throat. She'd warned us. This was the plan. This was her being smart. This was Delia rationing. Tobias sat next to me and didn't say anything. And Tobias not saying anything was its own kind of verdict. Then at nearly 7, she came on. And her voice was different, slower. The steadiness in it had gone from a nurse's discipline to something more like a person reading words off a page they'd written in advance. "Morning, Captain," she said. "I'm going to tell you some things now while I've got the voice for it. So listen and don't waste the battery being sad. The crowd down here is heavy. It's not going to clear. I've watched it 6 days, and I know what I'm watching. The road's not going to open for you, so you take that plan we made, and you tear it up. That was a plan for a different Marsh." I pressed the dead button. I pressed it and pressed it. "You've got 9 kids," she went on. "You've got Emmett breathing again. I can hear it in how you said his name yesterday. Don't ask me how, I just can. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. There is no version of this where you leave 9 children to come get one grown woman with a bad ankle. There's just not. And if you're sitting there doing the math and getting a different answer, then you're doing it with your heart. And today is not a heart day." She was quiet a moment. I could hear her breathing. "I have 31 rounds," she said. "And I have a door that holds. And I have a view of the water. And I have you all on this radio in the mornings, which is more than most people in this whole ruined world have got. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to keep them alive. That's the whole job now. That's the only job. And I'm going to keep telling you how every morning, as long as I've got a voice and a door, because I'm a very good nurse, and you are going to need one. I want to tell you I argued. I want to tell you I made some heroic speech into a microphone that sent nothing. What I actually did was put my forehead against the cold edge of the table and stay there while a 13-year-old boy put his hand on my back. Awkward, not knowing how, the way a kid touches a grieving adult. And then Biscuit, the old shepherd, started staring at the vent. I got up because getting up was easier than sitting. I followed the dog's eyes to the return air grill high on the hallway wall, and I stood under it, and I listened. And under the ordinary sounds of the building, I heard a new one, a slow, dragging shift, a soft, wet breath that did not belong to any of us. Something had gotten into the ductwork. The old boiler system connected to the outside through an intake on the Marsh side, an intake I had checked on day 1 and found screened and secure. And the screen had been secure. But 6 days of the tide pressing bodies against the building had done what 6 days of pressure does. Something had come through the intake and was in the ducts. And the ducts ran the length of the building, over every classroom, over the room where I'd bolted the door. I need to explain the bolted door now, because I've been carrying it this whole time, and it's time to set it down. On the 4th day of being trapped, before the radio caught Delia, one of the infected had gotten into the vestibule. Just one. It had come through the outer door when the wind pulled it, and it had stood in that airlock all night breathing on the inner glass. And in the morning, a boy named Sorrel, 8 years old, had gone to look at it up close the way an 8-year-old will. And it had thrown itself at the inner door hard enough to crack the glass. And in the scramble to pull Sorrel back, the inner chain had held, but a splinter of that cracked glass had opened a long cut across the boy's forearm. Just a cut. From glass. Not a bite. I want to be clear, because it mattered enormously at the time, and matters more now. It was glass, not teeth. but we didn't know. In that world, you didn't know. And Delia wasn't there to tell us, so I did the only thing 11 days had taught me, which was to reduce the arithmetic. And I put Sorrel alone in a classroom. And I bolted the door from the outside. And I told him through it that it was just to be safe, just for a couple of days, just until we were sure. And he cried and asked what he'd done wrong, and I had no answer that an 8-year-old could hold. That was the 10th child. That was there had been 10. Sorrel was behind the bolted door, not Delia. I let you believe it was Delia because that's the shape the fear took in my own head for a long time. The two of them braided together, the sister I couldn't reach and the boy I'd locked away. Both of them talking to me through a barrier, one on a radio and one through a door. Both of them asking me to come, and both of them impossible to reach without spending the safety of everyone else. And now something was in the ducts, moving toward the room where I'd sealed a boy whose only crime was being curious about a monster. If this is the kind of story you want more of, tell me in the comments where you're listening from right now. And then stay close, because the next hour of that day is the part I still hear at night. I got the children into the gymnasium, the interior room with no ducts of its own, the safest box in the building. And I put Tobias at the door with the whistle, and I told him the one true thing I had left to give him, which was that if I didn't come back in an hour, he was in charge, and the road out the bus bay was his to choose. Then I went down the hall toward the dragging sound with a fire axe from the boiler room and a headlamp with a dying battery. The thing in the ducts had found the room. I knew because Sorrel was screaming. The vent in his room, the return grill, had been kicked and dented from the inside of the duct, and the screws were pulling loose, and I could see fingers, gray and split, working at the gap. I did the only thing there was to do. I unbolted the door I'd bolted 4 days before, and I went in to get the boy I'd locked away, and the grill came free above us with a shriek of the metal, and the thing that had been feeding down the ductwork poured out of the ceiling into the room. I won't dwell on the fight. It was close, and it was ugly, and the axe did its work. And when it was over, I was down on one knee with the boy behind me and my ears ringing. And I had a long, shallow tear on my own forearm from the grill's edge, from metal, from the same kind of accident that had put Sorrel behind that door. And the irony of that was not lost on me even then. But here is the thing that changed everything. Sorrel was fine. 4 days sealed in a room with a cut that would have turned if it was going to turn. 4 days, and he was thin and hoarse and furious and heartbreakingly, ordinarily alive. A cut from glass was just a cut. I had locked a healthy, terrified child alone in the dark for 4 days because I did not have the one person who could have told me it was safe. And she had been 2 miles away the whole time telling me everything else. I carried Sorrel to the gym, and I put him with the others, and the little ones swarmed him. And Wren, who did not speak, took his hand. And I went and sat against the wall and looked at my own arm, the metal cut, twin to his. And I understood the shape of the thing I'd been living inside. The danger had never been only outside. The danger had been in what I couldn't know. And the one thing that could have made me know was a voice on a radio I couldn't answer. That afternoon, I made the choice. Not the choice you might think. I did not decide to cross the marsh. Delia was right about the marsh, right the way she was always right. And I knew that going out into that tide meant leaving 9 children and probably dying in the open, a mile short of a stairwell. She had done the math with her heart taken out of it. And the math was true. The choice I made was smaller and harder. I decided to give her a voice back. Our radio couldn't transmit. But Tobias, 13 years old and smarter than the whole broken world, had been taking apart the school's old intercom system out of boredom for 2 days. And the intercom had a transmitter, a weak one, meant to carry announcements to a parking lot. And if I understood what he was showing me, we could patch it. We could bridge the crank radio's antenna to the intercom's amplifier and push a signal, thin and short range, but a signal, onto the band Delia was using. It took us the rest of that day and most of the night, working by the dying headlamp and a hand-crank lantern. Tobias's fingers steadier than mine, both of us whispering so the sound wouldn't carry to the tide outside. And near dawn, on the 7th morning, when the sky went from black to the color of dishwater, we had it. A green light, a carrier, a way to speak. I want to tell you the first thing I said to my sister after 4 days of pressing a dead button. But the truth is, I didn't say anything smart or brave. I keyed the mic and my voice came out wrecked, and I said, "Counted for you, Captain." And there was a silence so long I thought the patch had failed. And then Delia laughed, a real laugh, cracked and dry and hers. And she said, "Well, look who learned to talk." We had 11 minutes. That's how long her battery lasted, and mine, and the fragile patch that Tobias had built out of a decommissioned intercom. 11 minutes. The only two-way conversation I would have with my sister in what was left of the world. And I'm not going to give you all of it, because some of it belongs to her and me. But I'll give you the part that matters. She told me the water had run out the day before. She told me the crowd below her had not thinned, and would not, that she'd watched a whole day and known. She told me, in her nurse's report voice, gone gentle at the edges, that she'd known for 3 days how this ended for her, and that she had made her peace with it in the only currency she had left, which was making sure the 9 of us didn't end the same way. "You listen to me now," she said. "You've got a green light on that intercom, which means you've got range, which means you can reach the highway relay. There's a repeater on the water tower off Route 236. I can see it from here. And if you push through it, you might reach the Coast Guard station at the harbor. There are people at the harbor, Roan. I've heard them on the low band at night. They've got boats. Boats mean water between you and this. You get those children to the harbor. I'm not doing this without you." "You already are," she said, not unkind, just true. "You have been for 4 days, and you did it right. Now I need you to do the last of it right too. And the last of it is that you don't waste 1 more hour of that battery or 1 more ounce of yourself trying to reach me. You point everything you've got at that harbor. Promise me on the count. The count, our count, the seats, front to back, 2 fingers on the last rail. I promised her on the count. She talked me through the harbor plan in the minutes she had left. Coordinates from memory. The tide tables that would matter. Which marsh road flooded and which held. 22 years of my own route handed back to me by the sister who'd ridden it one summer. And remembered more of it than I'd thought anyone could. And near the end, with the battery light going red on my side, she asked to talk to the children. And I carried the mic to the gym, and one by one the little ones said good morning to the Fox lady on the radio. And she told them the Fox was going to be very busy for a while, but that he'd left the school in good paws. And Wren, who had not said a single word in 18 days, leaned to the microphone and said in a small, clear voice, "Bye, Danny Fox." Delia made a sound I won't describe. Then the battery went, hers or ours, I never knew which. And the green light died, and the hiss came back, and my sister was gone off the air the way she'd promised she would be, on our own terms, on a schedule, rationed to the end. We left Marsh Point at the next low tide, 4 days later, when I'd used the patched intercom to reach the water tower repeater and, through it, on the third night of trying, a tired man's voice at the harbor who said the words I'd stopped believing existed. "Copy, Marsh Point. We've got a boat?" Getting 9 children 2 miles through a marsh at the ebb, in the dark, heel to toe, is a story of its own, and not the one the title promised you, so I'll only say this. We made it because I knew that route better than any living man. Because a sick boy could breathe again thanks to a code that was just the building number. Because a 13-year-old could build a radio out of an intercom. And because a woman in a stairwell had spent the last clear mornings of her life turning herself into a map to somewhere safe. We lost no one on the crossing. I counted them onto the boat, front to back, and I touched the rail of the transom with 2 fingers. And the Coast Guard man watched me do it and didn't ask. That was 14 months ago. We're on an island now, a real community, close to 200 people, walls of water on every side, gardens, a school where the children don't have to whisper. Emmett runs everywhere. Sorrel forgave me, mostly in the way children forgive, which is more than I deserve, and I take it anyway. Wren talks now, all the time, makes up for the lost weeks, and every so often she'll ask me to tell the one about the fox under the school. I still have the crank radio. I keep it charged. And every morning, just after first light, out of a habit I cannot break, and would not if I could, I take it down to the water and I turn it on. And I scan the low band, the little handheld frequency, the one a security radio in a parking structure once reached us on. There's never anything. Of course, there's never anything. I know the arithmetic. I did it with my heart taken out, the way she taught me. But I sit there anyway, on the rocks, with the radio hissing, and I key the mic that can't reach anything anymore. And I say the same 2 words into the salt air every single morning. Because I told her I would keep the count. And a promise made on the count is the last thing left in this world that I still hold sacred. Counted for you, Captain? And most mornings, that's the end of it. The hiss, the water, the walk back up. But I'll tell you the thing I've never told anyone on this island. The thing that keeps me coming back to those rocks, when any sensible man would have stopped months ago. 3 weeks ago, in the hiss, just for a second, just under the static, I thought I heard a laugh. Cracked and dry, gone before I could be sure. Probably nothing. Probably an old man's ear making the shape it most wants out of noise. The mind does that. Delia would have had a clinical name for it. But I've started staying longer on the rocks. And I've started counting the boats in the harbor, front to back, 2 fingers on the last one, just in case the arithmetic out there ever changes. Just in case, some morning, the road finally clears, because I left my sister behind to save the kids. That much I chose, and I'd choose it again. And it's the heaviest thing I carry, and the only thing I'm sure I got right. But I still hear her, and until the morning I don't, I'm going to keep turning that crank.